The alarm buzzed at 6:30. Not a pleasant chime, not a melody, just the stock vibration Evan had never bothered to change. It drilled into his skull until he rolled his arm across the nightstand, groped for his phone, and silenced it with a fumbling swipe of a thumb. For a moment, he lay flat on his back, staring at the ceiling. The hairline crack above him caught the morning light, a faint scar in the plaster. He traced it with his eyes the way one might follow the curve of a constellation. It reminded him of a branch, or sometimes a river. Though he wasn't in the mood for metaphors today, he just needed to get up. The kettle on his stove hissed and popped as he boiled water for instant coffee. Evan leaned on the counter, staring through the small kitchen window into the alley below. A man in a dark coat wheeled a trash bin toward the curb. Two pigeons shifted across the rim of a dumpster, wings flicking irritably at each other. The glass of the window was streaked from last night's rain, the watermarks like veins under tired skin. Evan's apartment was a one-bedroom unit on the 4th floor of an aging building downtown. The walls were thin. He could hear the muted hum of a neighbor's TV in the evenings, but he didn't mind. The noises reminded him that life happened nearby without asking him to participate. His own space was spare: a sofa, a coffee table with faint ring stains, a bookshelf that was half empty except for some paperbacks and old manuals from past jobs. He sipped his coffee and stared at the clock on the microwave until it turned to 7:12. Time to leave. The sidewalks were damp with last night's drizzle, reflecting the early light in broken patches. A bus rumbled by, sighing as it stopped at the corner. A cluster of commuters shuffled inside. A young woman in a red scarf balancing a cardboard tray of lattes. An older man adjusting his tie in the bus window's reflection. A boy with a backpack too big for his frame. Evan didn't take the bus. He walked. His office was close enough that it seemed wasteful to sit in traffic. Besides, walking gave him a kind of rhythm, a way to ease himself into the day before the hum of fluorescent lights and the weight of people's voices pressed down on him. On his way, he passed a bakery that always smelled faintly of cinnamon. The glass case in the window displayed neat rows of golden croissants and glossy fruit tarts. A woman behind the counter with cropped black hair and a small gold hoop in her nose arranged pastries with precise care, sliding them on trays so that none touched. Evan didn't know her name. He had seen her every weekday for nearly 2 years, and they had never spoken. At the next block, he crossed paths with a man selling newspapers. The man's beard was wiry and grey, his hands chapped red from the cold. His voice cracked as he called out headlines to passers-by. Evan rarely caught the words, but the cadence was familiar, a chant that blended into the city's background. He kept his head down, offered a polite nod, and walked on. The office was a beige mid-rise with tinted windows and a lobby that always smelled faintly of carpet cleaner. Evan swiped his badge and rode the elevator up to the 6th floor, where the air was already warm from the servers humming in the back room. Desks stretched in rows under pale light. He passed them one by one, offering nods that didn't expect replies. At his own cubicle, he set his bag down, logged into his computer, and waited for the screen to load. "Morning, Evan." He turned. Mark from accounting leaned against the divider, nursing a paper cup of coffee. Mark was the kind of man who filled silence with anecdotes about the traffic, about his kids, about how the coffee was weak today compared to last week. His shirts were always a little too bright, like he picked them to force a mood onto the room. Today's was sunflower yellow. "Morning," Evan said, already typing in his password. "You catch the game last night?" Mark asked. "No." Mark chuckled. "Of course not. You're not a sports guy." He grinned and took a sip, the corner of his lip stained faintly by foam. Evan gave a small nod and pulled up his inbox. The rest of the floor stirred around him, printers warming up, keyboards tapping, voices drifting in and out of conversations. Sarah from HR clicked by in pointed heels, her perfume cutting briefly through the recycled air. The intern, Kevin, wrestled with a jammed stapler and muttered under his breath. It was all ordinary, the kind of morning he had lived 100 times. Evan liked it that way. The predictability was its own kind of shelter. And yet, when he went to the restroom after his second cup of coffee, he paused at the sink. The mirror above the counter reflected his tired eyes, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. He rubbed his face, watching his reflection do the same. He leaned forward, turning his head slightly, as though testing it. Nothing unusual. Still, something about the way the glass caught the fluorescent light made him linger longer than usual, hand resting on the cool porcelain of the sink. By the time Evan's lunch break rolled around, the office had filled with the hum of machinery and chatter. Phones trilled, keyboards clattered in uneven rhythms, and fragments of conversations drifted over cubicle walls like scraps of paper caught in the wind. He packed a sandwich from home most days, ham and cheese on wheat, always wrapped in foil. But today he had forgotten. His stomach turned hollow as he stood near the elevator, debating whether to eat from the vending machine or walk out into the drizzle that hadn't yet lifted. Mark intercepted him. Going out? He was still in that too bright yellow shirt, sleeves rolled up now, revealing a pale line of skin where his watch usually sat. Yeah, probably. "You mind grabbing me something if you head to Patel's?" "Turkey, no onions. I'll pay you back." Evan hesitated. Patel's was only a block away, but he disliked errands that involved juggling someone else's preferences. Still, he nodded. "Sure. Appreciate it." Mark clapped him on the shoulder before vanishing into another conversation near the copier. Patel's Deli had been there for years, its awning faded from blue to grey, corners frayed from the wind. A bell chimed faintly as Evan pushed the door open. Inside, the air was warm and heavy with the smell of grilled meat and bread. The counter gleamed from constant wiping, and a row of chips hung in bright plastic bags along the wall. Behind the counter stood Mrs. Patel herself. She was a compact woman with silver hair pinned in a bun and sharp eyes that softened only when she smiled. She wore a maroon apron dusted with flour and kept a pencil tucked behind her ear. "Hello, Mr. Evan," she said, recognizing him at once. He blinked. "Hello." "You want the same today?" she asked, already reaching for the bread. "I forgot my lunch," he admitted. "I'll take the usual for me. And also a turkey, no onions." She scribbled quickly on the order pad. "For your friend." "Co-worker," Evan corrected, though it didn't matter. The deli filled with quiet sounds, the chop of the knife, the thud of bread against the counter, the sizzle from the grill. 2 construction workers sat at a corner table, their neon vests folded over their chairs, speaking low in Spanish. A teenager in a raincoat tapped at his phone while waiting for his order, earbuds hidden under a mop of wet hair. Evan slid into a booth by the window. Outside, rain streaked the glass in crooked rivulets, blurring the shapes of passing cars and umbrellas. The world seemed softer through the smear, as though it existed at a step removed. When Mrs. Patel brought his sandwiches in paper bags, she lingered a moment. "You work too hard," she said matter-of-factly, the way someone might comment on the weather. "Always tired when you come in here." He managed a small smile. "That's office life." She tisked softly but didn't argue. Back at the office, Mark thanked him with exaggerated gratitude, waving the sandwich in the air as though Evan had rescued him from starvation. Sarah from HR popped her head around the corner to ask if anyone had seen the missing stapler. Kevin, the intern, claimed innocence with too much eagerness, which made Mark laugh. Evan sat at his desk, unwrapped his own sandwich, and stared at the foil creases before eating. Around him, the office continued in its uneven rhythms. Phones, chatter, footsteps, laughter. At one point, he got up to fetch water from the cooler. He passed the glass panel near the conference room and caught his reflection faintly in it, his profile blurred against the bright window behind him. He paused without realizing it. There was nothing unusual, just his own outline, faint in the glass. He filled the cup, drank, and went back to his desk. The day ended in its usual stagger. Chairs scraping back, voices lowering, bags slung over shoulders. Evan stayed later than most. He liked leaving when the office was already hollow, the air emptied of voices. By the time he stepped out into the street, the rain had thinned to mist. Neon signs hummed against the wet air, bleeding color into the puddles. A bus screeched as it turned the corner, splashing water onto the curb. Evan tucked his hands in his pockets and walked home. Past the bakery with its warm window glow. Past the newspaper man, now packing his bundles into plastic covers for the night. Past the alley that led to his apartment building, where a single streetlight buzzed and flickered, fighting to stay lit. In his kitchen, he boiled water for tea instead of coffee, the steam clouding the window. He stood there long after the kettle had gone quiet, staring into the glass. The streaks of water on the pane distorted his reflection, warping his eyes, his mouth, his shoulders, until he almost didn't recognize himself. He turned away quickly, flicked off the light, and sat in the dark for a while, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Saturday mornings were quiet in Evan's building. Most of the tenants slept in, or if they were up early, they left without much noise. The radiators ticked faintly as warm air pulsed through the pipes, and the hall smelled of boiled cabbage from someone's late-night cooking. Evan made coffee and sat by the window with a book he'd been meaning to finish. He didn't read much, just turned pages, while the words slid past without landing. Outside, the alley was slick and grey. The pigeons huddled on the dumpster lid as though debating whether to fly off together. By mid-morning, he set the book aside and went to the bathroom to shave. The mirror fogged quickly from the hot water. He wiped a sleeve across it, leaving a streaked oval of clear glass, and bent close with razor in hand. His reflection stared back with the same tired eyes, the same slack line of mouth. He drew the razor along his cheek, listening to the scrape of hair against the blade. He rinsed, repeated, careful and deliberate. And then a flicker, small but there. As he lifted the razor from his face, his reflection lingered in the motion, arm raised a beat too long before catching up. Not a trick of the eyes, not something explainable by fog or poor lighting. A delay. Evan froze. Razor poised above the sink. He stared, moved his hand an inch to the left, slowly. The reflection moved too, but after the smallest breath of time, as though the glass were thinking it over before deciding to follow. His throat tightened. He set the razor down, and leaned forward until his forehead nearly touched the glass. His reflection stared back, eyes wide, mouth parted the same way his was. The lag was gone now, everything perfectly matched. He waited. His own breath fogged the glass, and then his reflection's fog bloomed a fraction after, like the echo of a sound in a distant hallway. Evan staggered back, heart kicking hard in his chest. He flicked off the bathroom light, shut the door, and stood in the dim hallway, palms sweating. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. Just light, or exhaustion, or some trick of steam. He told himself this, over and over, until the words dulled the edge of panic. But all day, no matter where he went, whether he walked to the store, whether he sat on his sofa with the TV murmuring low, he caught himself glancing at reflective surfaces, the microwave door, the darkened screen of his phone, the puddles on the sidewalk, looking for it again. And half the time, he thought he almost saw it, a hesitation, a delay, a version of himself that hadn't yet decided whether to follow. Sunday mornings usually carried a kind of background noise, footsteps in the hallway, muffled arguments from the couple on the third floor, someone's radio playing old jazz through thin walls. This morning, the building was still. Evan dressed slowly, tugging on a sweater, trying not to think about the mirror. He didn't look at it this time, only brushed his teeth with eyes fixed on the sink. When he was ready, he grabbed his coat and stepped outside. The air was sharp with early cold. His breath came white, curling away into nothing. The city was quiet for a Sunday, but not impossibly so. A single car passed, tires whispering on damp pavement. A dog barked faintly from a balcony, then fell silent. Evan walked toward the grocery store a few blocks away. He liked to shop early before the aisles filled. Usually, he passed a steady stream of people. Joggers in bright tights, couples holding paper cups of coffee, the bakery queue already forming. Today, the sidewalk felt wider. A man sweeping the stoop of a laundromat glanced up as Evan passed, then ducked his head again without a word. A delivery truck idled on the corner, but no driver emerged. The bakery window glowed warmly, but when Evan glanced inside, there were no customers, just the woman with the gold nose hoop arranging trays in silence. He slowed his pace. He told himself it was nothing. People slept late. Maybe the rain had kept them in. At the grocery store, he wandered the aisles. A clerk in a red apron stacked cans, his movements oddly mechanical, never looking up. Another employee pushed a mop down the freezer aisle, her earbuds in, expression blank. No other shoppers. Evan filled his basket, bread, milk, a bag of apples. He lingered at the shelves as though waiting for someone else to brush past, to squeeze by with a muttered sorry. The aisles stayed empty. At checkout, the cashier, a young man with acne scarring his cheeks, rang up his items with flat efficiency. He didn't say hello, didn't even glance at Evan. The scanner beeped, the register chimed, the bag crinkled, all in rhythm. Evan cleared his throat. Quiet this morning. The cashier blinked once, slid the receipt across the counter, and turned to the next register, where no one stood. Outside, the street had grown brighter. The sun caught in the wet pavement, glaring like broken glass. He shifted the bag of groceries in his hand and started home, the silence pressing close. When he reached his building, he caught himself glancing at the windows of parked cars. His reflection followed dutifully in each one, but he noticed it again. The faintest pause, like a dancer, a beat behind the music. Evan kept his eyes on the sidewalk and didn't look up again until he was safely inside. That night, Evan moved through his apartment with the lights low. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of the clock on the wall, those were normal, grounding sounds. He clung to them. But when he went to brush his teeth before bed, his stomach tightened. The bathroom mirror loomed, waiting. He paused in the doorway. The light above the sink buzzed faintly, the bulb a little too old, its glow uneven. He thought about leaving the teeth unbrushed, going straight to bed. But that seemed foolish, cowardly. It was just a mirror. He stepped forward. The reflection greeted him, hollow-eyed, sweater hanging loose at the shoulders. His hair stuck up unevenly at the crown. Ordinary, every detail accounted for. He let out a thin breath and uncapped the toothpaste. As he brushed, he forced himself to keep his eyes on the sink. The swirls of mint foam, the motion of his hand, the running water. But something tugged at him. An itch, a pull in the corner of his vision. He risked a glance. The reflection was brushing too, mouth full of white foam. But the rhythm was wrong. Off by half a beat. His hand rose, his reflection's hand followed, not quite in time. Evan froze, toothbrush poised halfway to his lips. His reflection didn't freeze. It continued brushing, slow and methodical, as if oblivious. The sound of his own bristles against his teeth filled the room, but he could see his doubles toothbrush dragging foam across teeth a moment after the sound. He spat into the sink, water rushing as he rinsed. The reflection caught up, spitting, rinsing, but the timing lagged. Evan leaned heavily on the sink, his breath shallow. The mirror fogged with the heat of his breath. And then, the reflection smiled. It wasn't wide or grotesque, just a small curve of the mouth, a sliver of expression his own face hadn't made. It lasted less than a second before settling back into his neutral, tired look. He staggered back, bumping into the doorframe. His toothbrush clattered onto the tile. The mirror showed him the same movement, delayed, but the reflection's toothbrush didn't fall. It remained clutched in his counterpart's hand, held steady at his side. Evan switched off the light and fled the bathroom, the darkness of his apartment suddenly feeling safer than the glow of the mirror. He didn't go back for the toothbrush. Monday morning arrived grey and wet, the clouds hanging low enough to swallow the tops of the buildings. Evan wrapped his scarf tightly and walked the familiar route to the office, his shoes whispering against the slick pavement. He noticed the quiet again. Not just the absence of chatter or the thin crowd of commuters, but the way the city seemed hollow. The bakery's window glowed warmly, but the woman with the nose hoop didn't look up from her trays. The usual line was gone. No one lingered with steaming cups. No one pressed close against the glass. The newspaper man wasn't there at all. His corner was empty, the neat stacks of paper absent, as though he had never stood there. Evan stopped. He turned slowly, scanning the street. Cars passed, but fewer than normal. A bus rolled to a stop, hissing out a breath of exhaust. Its doors opened. No one got on. No one got off. The driver didn't look his way. At the office, the lobby was quiet. The faint smell of carpet cleaner sharper than usual in the stillness. He swiped his badge. The turnstile clicked. The elevator opened without anyone stepping out. When he reached the 6th floor, the lights were on, computers humming, chairs pulled neatly under desks, but no one was there. No Mark in his sunflower shirt, no Sarah's perfume trailing down the hall, no Kevin wrestling with the stapler, just the muted buzz of fluorescent light. Evan stood in the middle of the floor, his pulse thudding in his ears. He whispered, "Hello?" The sound carried strangely, as if the walls swallowed it. He sat at his desk anyway, booting up his computer. The login screen appeared, but the internet lagged when he tried to open his email. The inbox showed no new messages, though the timestamp suggested days had passed. The phone on his desk rang. Evan jolted, staring at it. The sound was shrill, urgent, impossibly loud in the empty office. He reached for the receiver and pressed it to his ear. "Hello," a voice answered, fast, strained, but distorted, like it was underwater. The words spilled too quickly, syllables overlapping, impossible to catch. It might have been a man's voice, or a woman's, or several voices layered together. "I can't..." Evan pressed the phone tighter against his ear. "You're breaking up." The voice didn't slow. It rose, cracked, then fell away into static. "Wait," Evan said, his throat dry. "Wait, I can't understand you." The line went dead. The dial tone buzzed like an insect, drilling into his skull. He dropped the receiver back into its cradle and sat frozen. In the glass of the darkened monitor, his reflection stared back. The faintest delay lingered between his breath and the fog it left on the screen. That night, Evan avoided the bathroom as long as he could. He heated soup from a can and ate it at the kitchen table, staring at the dark window across from him. The glass showed his outline faintly, warped by streaks of condensation. He turned the overhead light off so he wouldn't have to see it at all. But eventually, he had to pass through the hallway, and the mirror at the end of it waited like a mouth. He paused outside the bathroom door, palms damp against his thighs. His toothbrush still lay on the tile where he had dropped it nights ago. He opened the door anyway. The mirror was there, of course, patient as ever. His reflection stood where he stood, but something about the posture felt deliberate, straighter, shoulders squared, as though it had been waiting for him. He reached down, picked up the toothbrush, and set it on the counter. His reflection didn't follow. Evan froze. His hand had moved. He had seen it move, but the mirrored hand hung at his side. Still, he lifted both arms slowly, testing. His reflection raised its arms too, but not quite in sync. The timing was wrong again. He turned his head sharply to the left. The reflection lingered a heartbeat too long before catching up. But in that breath of delay, he saw it. Its eyes weren't on him. They flicked sideways, as though glancing at something outside the frame. Evan's skin went cold. He leaned forward until his nose nearly touched the glass, searching his reflection's face. It stared back with that same too long focus, mouth slack, eyes faintly shining in the fluorescent light. And then it smiled. Not the twitch from before. This was slower, wider, a patient grin that stretched just enough to make Evan's stomach clench. His own face remained rigid, unmoving. He stumbled back, his shoulder hitting the doorframe. The reflection followed the motion a moment later, the smile already gone, face neutral again. Evan flicked off the light. The mirror sank into darkness, but when he turned to leave, he thought he saw movement in the black glass, a faint shift, a shape leaning just a little closer than it should have. Evan woke late, sunlight already prying through the blinds. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, the vibration rattling against a stack of unopened mail. He blinked blearily at the screen, a name he recognized, Maya, one of the project coordinators from work. He thumbed the green circle and pressed the phone to his ear. "Hello." The voice on the other end came in sharp, urgent bursts, but warped, muffled, as if played underwater. He couldn't make out a word. "Hello," Evan tried again. His own voice sounded strangely thin, like it didn't carry right. The muffled voice rose in pitch, frantic. He heard his name in it, or thought he did, but the rest dissolved into static. Then the line went dead. Evan stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. His stomach turned heavy. He tried to call back, but the connection failed before it even rang. The apartment felt close, stifling. He pulled on his jacket and stepped outside, determined to see another human being. The stairwell was empty. The lobby was empty. He pushed through the glass doors onto the street and was met with silence. No cars passed. No footsteps echoed. The storefronts were lit, neon signs flickering faintly, but the sidewalk stretched bare in both directions. The city looked exactly as it always did, except hollowed out, as though someone had scooped away the people and left only the skin behind. He walked, his shoes scuffing against pavement that sounded too loud in the stillness. He passed a cafe where he'd sometimes buy coffee. The chalkboard menu still stood on the sidewalk, letters smudged from rain. Tables were neatly arranged inside, napkin holders full, but no barista stood behind the counter. No customers, no chatter, no smell of beans. Evan pressed his palms to the glass. His own reflection looked back at him faintly in the window, eyes wide, lips parted. Only, when he shifted his hands away, the reflection lingered, palms still flat against the glass for a second longer, as though reluctant to let go. A chill crawled across his arms. He shoved his hands into his pockets and kept walking. By the time he reached the office building, his throat had gone dry. The automatic doors opened with their usual hiss. The lobby was lit, plants watered, the receptionist's desk neat and waiting. But no receptionist. Not even the hum of distant voices from the cubicles upstairs. Evan rode the elevator to his floor, heart thudding. The open-plan office spread out before him, glowing with screensavers. Chairs tucked in neatly, stacks of paper waiting for hands that hadn't come. His desk lamp shone faintly, illuminating the mug he'd left there yesterday. He whispered, "Hello." Nothing. He sank into his chair and rubbed his face with his hands. The silence pressed against him like a weight. When he looked up, he caught sight of himself in the darkened monitor. The reflection's head tilted slightly to one side, a fraction too slow, like a curious animal studying him. By the third morning, Evan stopped turning on the bathroom light. He brushed his teeth in the dark, the bristles scraping faintly, his eyes fixed on the rectangle of glass across the counter. He couldn't bear to look directly anymore, not when he wasn't sure what would be waiting. Sometimes there was nothing, just the bathroom tiles and the dim frame of the window. No trace of him. It was worse than when the reflection had lagged, worse than the strange smiles. Seeing nothing at all felt like being erased piece by piece. Other times, when the reflection did appear, it wasn't tethered to him. He might lift his toothbrush, but the figure in the mirror would remain still, head cocked, a fraction behind, studying him. And more than once now, when he turned away from the mirror, he felt eyes on the back of his neck. The first time it happened, he had been washing dishes. Soap suds clung to his wrists, water rushing in the sink. He looked up at the kitchen window and froze. His reflection wasn't there. But when he turned, just for an instant, something pale and familiar darted behind the open pantry door. A glimpse of his own shoulder, the corner of his jaw. Gone the moment he blinked. He didn't move for nearly a minute, heart hammering against his ribs, suds dripping from his fingertips. It happened again 2 nights later. He was sitting on the couch, television dark, The room filled with the faint hum of the fridge. From the corner of his vision, movement, someone seated in the armchair across the room. He whipped his head to look, but the chair was empty. Still, his pulse throbbed with certainty. He had seen the curve of his own head there, watching him. By the end of the week, the mirrors had grown unreliable altogether. In the hall, the full-length glass sometimes showed only an empty hallway. In the bathroom, he would lean in close and find nothing staring back. And yet, when he walked down the empty streets outside, when he turned the corner of an abandoned cafe, when he caught the shine of a glass door, sometimes a shape slipped out of view just before he could focus. A figure, pale and familiar, just past the edge of sight. It was his reflection, he knew. It had left its cage, and now it was following him. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Evan moved through it like a ghost, careful not to make more noise than necessary. He did not look in mirrors anymore. Sometimes he wondered if the reflection had noticed he had stopped, if it waited for him to grow reckless. The phone buzzed on the counter. He hesitated. When he finally checked, the screen displayed a message from Mark. "Hey Evan, are you coming in today? We need to finalize the quarterly report. Also, I think you missed Sarah's call. Call me back." Evan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He wanted to reply. He wanted to explain. But when he typed, the words didn't feel right. They slid across the screen as if he was speaking through someone else's mouth. The message felt alien. He scrolled through his email. Messages stacked up, all addressed to him. Some were mundane, meeting reminders, client notes. Others were more insistent. Mark asking for updates, Sarah checking in, the HR system pinging him about overdue forms. Every one of them referenced his presence, and yet, every one of them had already been answered. He clicked on one. "Thanks for handling the report, Evan. See you at the meeting tomorrow." The cursor blinked. The message was sent from his own address, but he hadn't sent it. Evan sank into the chair, heart slamming. The city outside moved with a strange, distant rhythm. Cars hummed past, people walking, talking, laughing. He watched, utterly invisible. Every face turned past him as though he were air. And then, a figure approached his office building. Familiar gait, shoulder set just so. The light from the lobby reflected off a clean-shaven jaw. His own face, perfectly replicated. He didn't move. He couldn't. Days, or maybe weeks, passed in the same rhythm. Evan wandered through empty streets, through silent offices, past stores with neatly stacked merchandise and unlit cash registers. No one acknowledged him. No one even saw him. Sometimes, in the corner of his vision, he glimpsed it. A shadow, pale and precise, following him just beyond reach. He stopped counting the mirrors he passed, stopped trying to force it back into its glass prison. It had left. It was free now, moving through the city in his stead. Emails pinged continuously on his laptop, all answered, all in his voice. Messages from Mark and Sarah, from HR, from clients. Handled already. The reflection had learned the rhythms of his life, the motions of his day. It had become him. Evan stood by a coffee shop window, looking inside. The reflection sat at a table, sipping coffee, tapping at a laptop, smiling faintly as if sharing a joke with someone nearby. The city had not changed. Only Evan had. He stepped back from the glass, alone, invisible, helpless. In the quiet of the empty street, he caught movement at the corner of his eye, a glimpse of himself, his reflection. but no longer bound by mirrors, always just a step behind, watching, waiting. And then he walked on, swallowed by the empty city, following a life that was no longer his,